Welcome to Mystery Stories for Sleep, where the unknown meets the mysterious. Relax, unwind, and let the intrigue carry you into the night. Your journey into the strange begins now.
Welcome, everyone, to our deep dive. We're heading to Salem, Massachusetts this time. And yeah, I know you're already thinking about witches, Halloween, the whole nine yards. Seems like Salem's practically built on spooky season, right?
It's true, Salem's got that reputation for a reason. But we're going deeper than the witch hats and ghost tours today. We're going to unpack the real history, the fascinating and sometimes pretty unsettling story that makes Salem so unique.
We're talking first-hand accounts, historical texts, even some modern takes on witchcraft to really see what was happening underneath it all. So ready to head back to 1692 with me. Picture a small village, kind of isolated, and fear and suspicion are starting to bubble up. Life in 1692 Salem, Massachusetts, well, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows even before the witch accusations started flying.
Exactly. This was a deeply religious community, strong beliefs in the supernatural, especially the devil's influence. Not unusual for the time period, sure, but in Salem, these beliefs were woven right into everyday life. Then you add on things like disease, the threat of attacks from neighboring tribes, even just those brutal New England winters. It all adds up to a community already on edge.
Right, so into that mix comes a group of young girls claiming they're afflicted by witchcraft, they're writhing, having fits, the whole bit. You can see how in that environment things could escalate quickly.
And escalate they did. Accusations started flying, and they weren't random. We see patterns in who was accused that tell us a lot about the social and political dynamics of Salem Village.
So it wasn't just the supernatural stuff that was fueling the fire.
Not even close. A lot of the accused were women, often those who were already on the fringes of society. Outspoken women, independent, maybe they knew a little something about herbal remedies, things that raised eyebrows back then.
Makes you think about how easily those accusations could be used against people.
Exactly. Beneath the surface, you had simmering resentments, property disputes, power struggles, accusing someone of witchcraft. That became a weapon, a way to go after anyone who went against the grain or threatened the established order.
It's a stark reminder of how fear and social pressure, they can be twisted, manipulated to devastating effect. And that's something that resonates even centuries later, don't you think? It's just chilling when you think about those accusations. Fueled by fear, by paranoia. It's hard to imagine how they spiraled so far out of control. And the consequences, well, we know how devastating they were. Over 200 people accused, 20 innocent lives lost during the trials.
And the real tragedy, is that so many of those condemned, they were denied any chance at a fair trial, like take Giles Corey, for instance. Refused to plead either way, probably a desperate attempt to protect his family's land from being seized. But it led to his death, a horrifying death by pressing.
More weight. Those words, supposedly his last words during that ordeal, they've echoed through history, haven't they? Chilling reminder of how brutal the trials were and the conviction, the sheer desperation of those caught in the middle of it all.
It reminds us that what happened in 1692, it wasn't just an abstract historical event. These were human tragedies, real people. And those ripples, those effects, they're still felt today, maybe nowhere more strongly than in Salem itself.
Right, you can't escape it. Even now, over 300 years later, Salem has this aura. It's more than just the gift shops and the ghost tours, although there are plenty of those now. There's this energy there, a feeling like the history is just embedded in the very air.
Like it's imprinted on the landscape. 1692, It left its mark. It's what captivates people, what unsettles them. And some places, well, they hold on to that energy more than others, The witch house. For one, I've got to admit, even for someone who loves history, the thought of actually being in that house, Judge Corwin's former home, it's chilling.
I get it. Knowing that inside those walls, Corwin, he was the presiding judge, he interrogated people accused of witchcraft. He decided their fates. It adds a weight to the atmosphere for sure. So yeah, no surprise, the witch house is a magnet for paranormal investigation. Visitors, researchers, they report some pretty unsettling stuff happening there.
And speaking of unsettling, we can't forget the old Burying Point Cemetery. That's where so many key figures from the trials are buried, including some of the accused. The atmosphere in that place among those old headstones, it gets to you.
It's a heavy place. You feel the weight of history there. The uneven ground, the inscriptions on the stones faded with time. Some going all the way back to the 1600s. Each one is like they're whispering these tales of a different time, of lives cut short, tragically. People talk about feeling uneasy there, even scared, especially around the graves of those most connected to the trials, like Judge Hawthorne. He was known for his harsh interrogations.
It makes you wonder, though, right? Is that feeling of unease, is it just us, connecting to the stories, the history? Or could there be something more? Is it possible that those emotions, that fear, the anger, the desperation, that it somehow lingers, imprinted on the environment somehow?
It's the question, isn't it? It's fascinated people for decades. Historians, paranormal investigators, even psychologists. No easy answer, of course. But places like the old burying place cemetery, they tap into something deep down. A fascination with the unknown, with what we don't understand, with what might lie beyond what we can see.
Yeah, it's like visiting these places. We're not just observing history anymore. We're stepping into it, feeling that echo, those emotions that were once so real, so powerful. And it's not just the cemeteries and the houses. Gallows Hill, the execution site, even though the exact location is still debated, it still has this aura of tragedy about it.
Absolutely. People go there to connect with that past, to pay their respects to those who lost their lives. You can't deny the weight of that history.
It's strange to think about, though, right? This place, Salem, it's so tied to fear, to persecution, to tragedy. But now it's almost become synonymous with Halloween. Like, Salem has embraced its past, taken something dark and turned it into, well, its identity. It's kind of wild, right? Salem took this dark history and just flipped it. Instead of hiding from it, they made it part of the town's whole thing. Ghost tours, haunted happenings, it's all there.
It's fascinating, really, how a community can go through something like that and come out the other side, reclaiming their story, finding new meaning in something that was once hidden, seen as shameful. And it's more than just making a buck off the spooky stuff, you know?
Yeah.
There's this real drive to understand what happened, to learn from it, to make sure something like that never happens again.
And you're right, it goes beyond the ghost stories and all that. There's this whole other side to Salem now, a reclaiming of the whole idea of witchcraft itself.
Totally. Salem's become a haven for modern witches, for Wiccans. It's a place where those beliefs that have been so misunderstood, they're actually celebrated instead of feared.
Talk about a turnaround. From a time when even saying the word witch could get you in huge trouble, now people are embracing those traditions openly.
It speaks to a bigger change in society, don't you think? More acceptance, more openness to different ways of thinking, realizing there's more to the world than what we see on the surface. We've come a long way from the fear and rigidity of 1692.
From witch hunts to what witch pride parades in a few hundred years. I wonder what those accused back then would make of it all, to see how their story became part of the very place that tried to silence them.
Something to think about, that's for sure. But maybe the biggest thing we can take from Salem, from this whole deep dive, isn't just about the past. It's about how it connects to us now. What happened in 1692, as awful as it was, it's a reminder. It shows us what can happen when fear takes over, when suspicion and social pressure run wild. And sadly, it's something that still resonates today.
You hit the nail on the head. It's easy to look back at 1692 and think, oh, that was then, that was different. But when we look closer, those same things are still happening today. The need to blame someone, the spread of misinformation and fear-mongering, how easily we turn against people who see things differently. These aren't things of the past, they're challenges we're still dealing with.
Exactly. And that's a lesson Salem teaches us, if we're willing to listen. By understanding what happened back then, those forces that led to such a tragedy, by recognizing the danger of unchecked fear and prejudice, maybe, just maybe, we can create a different future, one where something like that never happens again.
So as we wrap up our time in Salem, let's hold on to more than just the spooky stories and the historical details. Let's remember the lessons. Let's remember the power of fear, but also the importance of thinking for ourselves, of having empathy, understanding different perspectives. Because Salem shows us history isn't just dates and events. It's about people, the choices they made, and the strength of the human spirit, for good or for bad. And that's something that'll always be relevant.